The twisted metal screamed as it scraped against the Pacific Coast Highway, sparks flying like angry fireflies in the California darkness. Vivian Cross gripped her steering wheel tighter, watching in horror as the black Maybach ahead of her suddenly jerked to the right, tires smoking as the driver seemed to lose all control. The car flew off the highway, tumbling down the rocky cliff before slamming into a cluster of boulders with a sickening crunch. Then came the orange glow flames licking at the crumpled hood, growing bigger by the second. Most people would have called 911 and waited. Vivian wasn't most people. She yanked her old Civic to the shoulder, hazard lights flashing as she grabbed the emergency kit from her passenger seat, the same kit she always carried after 12 years of working as an ER nurse. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled down the slope, loose rocks sliding under her worn sneakers. The heat hit her face like a slap when she reached the wreckage. Through the spider-webbed windshield, she could see a man slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from his forehead. He wasn't moving. "Hey!" She pounded on the driver's side window. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. The flames were spreading, creeping toward the passenger compartment. Vivian didn't hesitate. She pulled back and drove her elbow into the window, ignoring the sharp pain as glass shattered around her. Her fingers found the door handle, but it was jammed, the driver's door completely crushed from the impact. She ran to the passenger side, praying it would open. The handle clicked. The door swung wide. Thank God. Vivian crawled across the leather seat, her lungs burning from the smoke filling the cabin. The man was unconscious, his breathing shallow. She could see he was maybe in his mid-30s, sharp jawline, dark hair now matted with blood. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, now torn and stained crimson. A faded scar ran along his chin, and on his wrist, partially visible beneath his sleeve, she caught a glimpse of a tattoo, a double-headed eagle. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. Come on, she muttered, using her trauma shears to cut through his seatbelt. The blade sliced clean, designed for exactly this kind of emergency. The belt snapped free, and she hooked her arms under his shoulders, pulling him toward the passenger door. He was heavier than she expected, dead weight that made her muscles scream. The heat was getting worse. She could hear the fire crackling louder, smell the acrid scent of burning leather and gasoline. Her training kicked in, the same training that had saved countless lives in the ER, the same instincts that had kept her alive through 3 years of Marcus's fists. She had learned to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly when others panicked. "You're not dying on my watch," she said through gritted teeth, dragging him free of the car. His body was limp, his head lolling against her shoulder as she pulled him away from the wreckage. 20 feet, 30, 50. The gas tank exploded just as she reached the bottom of the cliff. The force of the blast knocked them both to the ground. She threw herself over him, shielding his body with hers as burning debris rained down around them. The heat was intense, singeing the back of her scrubs, but they were alive. For a moment, they lay there in the dirt, her face pressed against his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Then he stirred. A soft groan escaped his lips. "Hey," she said softly, pulling back to look at his face. His eyes were opening gray, cold, like winter storms, unfocused and confused. "You're okay. You were in an accident, but you're okay." He blinked up at her, his gaze struggling to focus. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, tinged with a faint Russian accent. It wasn't an accident." "What?" Vivian leaned closer, certain she'd misheard. "Victor did this," he mumbled, his head falling back against the ground. "Victor betrayed me." Before she could ask what he meant, the sound of sirens filled the air. The ambulance was coming. She could see the flashing lights approaching on the highway above. Help was here. But as Vivian looked down at the man she'd just saved, his words echoed in her mind. It wasn't an accident. Victor did this. She thought she was saving someone from a terrible crash. But if he was telling the truth, she'd just saved someone from murder. And somewhere in the darkness above, she didn't notice the figure watching from a parked sedan, a man in a police uniform, his face twisted with rage as he recognized the woman kneeling beside the wreckage. Marcus Webb gripped his radio, his knuckles white. His ex-wife had just saved the one man he'd been paid to kill. If this story satisfies your soul, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs an escape tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell, because Vivian's nightmare is only just beginning. The red lights of the ambulance swept through the night like streaks of blood across a black sky. Vivian sat in the rear compartment, her hands still trembling as she looked at the man lying on the gurney. The monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, his heartbeat stable. yet he remained unconscious. She could not stop thinking about what he had whispered. Victor betrayed. It was not an accident. Those words kept circling in her mind like a broken song that would not shut off. When the vehicle came to a stop, Vivian recognized the place at once. St. Michael's, the hospital where she had worked for 7 years. The place where she spent 12 hours a day saving lives, trying to forget the past, trying to prove to herself that she still had some kind of worth in this world. "You were the one who saved him?" an EMT asked, as they pushed the gurney inside. "Yes." Vivian nodded and followed close behind. "I want to stay with this case. You are not scheduled tonight." "I know. But I saved him. I want to make sure he is all right." No one argued. At St. Michael's, Vivian was known as one of the best nurses on staff. She never gave up on a patient. Never. The emergency room was bright under fluorescent lights. Doctors and nurses moved around the man in a choreography practiced thousands of times. Vivian stood in the corner, watching. The wound on his forehead was stitched closed. His ribs were bruised but not broken. A few cuts from shattered glass. Overall, he was far luckier than the crushed car had suggested. "Oh my God," Rachel's whisper, her co-worker's voice, brushed Vivian's ear. "Vivian, do you know who you just saved?" "No." "Who?" Rachel pulled her a little farther away, her eyes wide as if she had just seen a ghost. "That is Nathaniel Volkov. You do not know?" "The head of the Volkov syndicate, Russian mafia. This whole city knows his face." Vivian felt as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water down her back. The mafia. She had thrown herself down a cliff, nearly burned to death, to save a mafia boss. "Are you sure?" Her voice came out dry, scraped thin. 100%. Every paper has his picture. He owns half the real estate in Beverly Hills, casinos, shipping, and other things nobody dares to say out loud. Rachel looked at her, worry sharpening her features. "Did you talk to him? Did he say anything?" Victor betrayed. "No." Vivian shook her head, her tone strangely calm. "He was completely unconscious." Rachel let out a breath. "Good. You do not want to get mixed up with people like that. Believe me." But Vivian was already mixed up. She knew it. She was standing outside the emergency room, trying to put her thoughts back in order, when a voice turned her blood to ice. "Vivian." She turned. Marcus Webb stood there in his police uniform, his badge gleaming under the hospital lights. He was almost a head taller than she was, broad-shouldered, square-jawed. There had been a time she thought he was handsome. Now she saw only a nightmare. "Marcus." She forced her voice to sound normal. "What are you doing here?" "Investigating the accident." He stepped closer, his cold blue eyes never leaving her face. "I hear you are the one who saved the victim." "Quite the hero." She did not answer. 2 years of divorce had taught her how not to react to his taunts. "Did the victim say anything?" he asked, pulling out a notebook, as if this were an official interrogation. "Before he passed out?" "No. He did not say anything at all." Marcus stared at her. That look. She knew it instantly. The look he gave her every time he knew she was lying. The look that came before every beating. "Is that so?" "It is." He stepped closer, closer still, until she could smell the familiar stench of cigarettes and cheap cologne. His hand closed around her arm, not hard enough to leave a bruise, but hard enough to make the message clear. "Come out here and talk for a minute." He dragged her into a deserted corner of the hallway, where there were no cameras, no witnesses. "Let go of me, Marcus." He did not. Instead, he leaned in to her ear, his breath hot and sour with beer. "I know you are hiding something." His whisper slid like a snake's hiss. "And you know what happens when you lie to me." Vivian felt the old scar along her ribs flare with pain. The scar from the time he had kicked her down the stairs 3 years ago. The scar she had been forced to explain to the doctor as a fall, because she had been too terrified to tell the truth. He released her arm and stepped back, arranging his face into a smile that anyone else would mistake for friendly. "I will be watching you, Vivian, just like I always do." Then he turned and walked down the hallway as if nothing had happened. Vivian stood there, her back pressed to the cold wall, her heart hammering as though it wanted to break out of her chest. She had escaped Marcus 2 years ago. She had thought she was free, but now she understood. She had never truly escaped him, and tonight, she had stepped into something even more dangerous than her violent ex-husband. She had saved a mafia boss, she had heard his secret, and neither Marcus nor the man named Victor would leave her in peace. 3 in the morning. The hospital corridor was empty, like a graveyard at rest. Vivian walked in silence, the sound of her shoes echoing off the cold tile beneath her. She had not been able to sleep after the encounter with Marcus. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his icy stare, felt his hot breath at her ear, heard the threat drilling deeper into her mind. Instead of lying awake in the staff break room, she decided to check on her patient, and her feet, as if they had a will of their own, carried her to room 412. She pushed the door gently and stepped into the dim glow of the nightlight. Nathaniel Volkov was still there, eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in an even rhythm. The monitor beeped softly in the quiet. She moved closer, checked the IV line, and wrote the numbers onto the chart. Then it happened in a blink. His hand shot out like a striking snake, clamping around her wrist with a grip strong enough to pull a small cry from her throat. His eyes snapped open, gray and cold as a blizzard, fully awake, fully dangerous. His other hand groped beneath the pillow, as if searching for something. A weapon. She knew it instantly. He was looking for a weapon. "I am a nurse," Vivian said, her voice calm in a way that surprised even her, though her heart was pounding hard. "I saved you last night. You are in the hospital." He did not let go. His gray eyes swept the room, measuring every exit, every possible threat, before settling on her face. She could feel that gaze as if he were reading the thoughts inside her head, dissecting every tiny movement in her expression for a sign of deceit. "Did you tell anyone what I said?" His voice was rough, still carrying the thinness of weakness, but it was cold, and it carried a threat. Vivian swallowed. She could lie. She had lied to Marcus, but there was something in this man's eyes that told her lying to him would be a fatal mistake. "Victor," she answered honestly. "You said Victor betrayed you." "I have not told anyone." The pressure on her wrist eased a fraction, but he still did not release her. Why? A simple question, but Vivian knew her answer could decide whether she lived or died in the next few seconds. "Because the police officer who questioned me had the eyes of someone who wants you dead," she said slowly, holding his stare. "I recognize those eyes. I have seen them too many times to mistake them." Silence. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. Not the calculating appraisal from before, something else, as if she had said something that forced him to reconsider her completely. "You can tell who wants to kill me just by looking into their eyes." His voice was no longer threatening. It held real curiosity. "I can tell who wants to hurt other people just by looking into their eyes," Vivian replied. "It is a survival skill." He released her wrist. Vivian stepped back, rubbing the skin, already reddening, and then the door burst open with a slam. A huge man charged in, head shaved clean, face carved with scars, and a black gun aimed straight at Vivian's chest. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Dimitri." Nathaniel's voice cut through the air, sharp and full of authority. "Lower the gun." The man named Dimitri did not lower it. "Who is she? What is she doing here?" "She is the one who saved my life last night," Nathaniel said, his tone unshaken. "Lower the gun. Right now. 1 second. 2. Then Dimitri lowered the weapon slowly, but his eyes never left Vivian, heavy with suspicion and hostility. "Get out," Nathaniel ordered. "Guard the door. No one comes in." Dimitri gave a stiff nod, threw Vivian one last warning look, and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Vivian let out a shaky breath. Her heart was still beating wildly. She had almost been shot. Inside her own hospital. "Do you know who I am?" Nathaniel asked, his voice calm, as if what had just happened were perfectly ordinary. "Nathaniel Volkov, the head of the Volkov syndicate." "Russian mafia," Vivian answered, her voice dry. "My coworker was very helpful with the details." He looked at her, and this time she saw the corner of his mouth lift. Not a warm smile. The smile of a predator who has found something interesting. "You know who I am. You know someone wants me dead. You could have sold that information in exchange for your own safety." He tilted his head, his gray eyes fixed on her face. "But you did not. Why?" Vivian had no answer. Or maybe she did, but she did not want to admit it, that she had seen Marcus in the eyes of that police officer, that she knew what it felt like to be betrayed by the person who was supposed to protect you, that even if Nathaniel Volkov was a monster, at least he was a monster who had never hurt her. "You have good instincts," Nathaniel said, the cold smile still on his mouth. "The question is, how long will they keep you alive now that you know too much?" Vivian pushed open the door to room 412 and stepped into the dim wash of hospital light. She knew exactly how she looked. Torn shirt, tangled hair, a bruise on her face from the fall as she climbed down the fire escape. and blood still seeping from the cut on her arm. She looked like someone who had barely escaped death, because she had. Dmitri reacted instantly. He sprang up from the chair beside the bed, a black gun aimed straight at her chest before she could even blink. For the second time tonight, she was staring down the mouth of a gun. Dmitri. Nathaniel's voice came from the hospital bed, calm as if he were talking about the weather. Lower it. The bodyguard did not lower the gun right away. His eyes swept Vivian from head to toe, weighing the threat, weighing the wounds, weighing the reason she would show up here at 4 in the morning in that condition. I said lower it, Nathaniel repeated, colder now. Dmitri lowered the gun, but he did not put it away. He stepped back 1 pace, still standing between Vivian and Nathaniel like a wall of flesh. Nathaniel watched her from the bed. He had pushed himself upright, back against the pillows, gray eyes sharp and cold as they moved over every bruise, every smear of blood on her. And then he spoke, with no surprise at all. They came for you. Not a question. A statement. Vivian swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady, even though her whole body was shaking. How do you know? Because Victor does not leave witnesses alive, Nathaniel answered, his eyes never leaving her. You saw me. You heard what I said. You know he betrayed me. For Victor, that is reason enough for you to die. Vivian felt her knees threaten to buckle. She gripped the doorframe, fighting to stay upright. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream that this was not fair, that she had only done a good thing, that she had only saved a man who was dying. But the tears did not come. She had forgotten how to cry a long time ago. Marcus had taught her that crying only made everything worse. Sit down, Nathaniel said, gesturing to the chair beside the bed. Before you collapse. She did not want to obey him, but her legs no longer had the strength to hold her. She walked to the chair and sank into it heavily, 1 hand clamped around her bleeding arm. Dmitri, get the first aid kit, Nathaniel ordered. The bodyguard looked at his boss as if he wanted to argue, but then he gave a curt nod and stepped out. Silence. Nathaniel studied her, his gray eyes deep and unreadable, as if he could see straight through her skin and into her soul. Then he spoke. You saved my life. I do not like owing anyone. His voice was slow, each word placed with care. Stay with me, and I will protect you. Vivian looked at him, and a bitter laugh slipped out of her throat. I do not want to owe the Mafia. You do not owe me. I owe you, Nathaniel said. This is me paying the debt. She shook her head. I do not need your help. I will handle it myself. The way you handled it tonight? Nathaniel asked, not mocking her, simply naming the truth. Victor will not stop. He will send others, and next time, you may not be lucky enough. Vivian said nothing. She knew he was right. How much does your sister owe? Nathaniel asked suddenly. $50,000? Vivian went rigid. The blood in her veins seemed to stop. How do you know about my sister? Because Lily owes Victor, Nathaniel replied, calm as if he were talking about the weather. The same Victor who wants to kill me. Do you understand? Vivian, we share an enemy. She stared at him, mouth open, but no sound came. Lily owed Victor. Her sister was tangled up with the man who had tried to kill Nathaniel. The man who had just sent people to kill her. Are they holding my sister? Her voice shook. Maybe, maybe not. But if you want to save your sister, you need me, Nathaniel said. And if I want to find Victor, I need someone at my side he will not expect. Someone who can move through this hospital without suspicion. Someone who has seen the faces of the men he sent. Silence. Vivian understood what he was offering. A deal. A transaction. She helped him, and he helped her. 2 weeks, Nathaniel said. You stay with me. Pretend to be my private doctor. Help me recover. In return, I protect you from Victor. And I will find your sister. And after 2 weeks, Victor will no longer be a threat to anyone. Nathaniel's voice was ice. And you are free. Dmitri returned with the first aid kit. He set it on the small table beside the bed, then stepped back again, resuming his guard. Vivian looked at the kit, then at Nathaniel. She had no other choice. She could not go back to her apartment. She could not go to the police because Marcus would find her. She had no money, nowhere to go, and her sister was caught in the hands of a man who wanted both of them dead. All right, she said, her voice dry. 2 weeks. Nathaniel nodded, showing no triumph, no satisfaction, only acceptance. Vivian stood, stepped closer to his bed, and looked straight into those cold gray eyes. If you betray me, she said, her voice steady, I will kill you with my own hands." Nathaniel looked at her. And then he smiled. Not the cold smile she had seen before. Something else. This smile reached his eyes, lit the gloomy gray, like a shaft of sun breaking through storm clouds. "I believe you will," he said. Nathaniel left the hospital that afternoon, despite every objection from the doctors. He signed the discharge papers, taking full responsibility, his handwriting sharp and cold, and then swung his legs out of bed as if the wounds on his body were nothing more than shallow scratches. Vivian watched from the corner of the room, still wearing the clothes a fellow nurse had lent her, her arm wrapped in a careful bandage. She had not slept at all since coming to his room. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw gleaming blades, masked faces, and her own blood dripping down the fire escape. A black Rolls-Royce waited at the rear entrance of the hospital. Dmitri opened the door, his gaze still hard and suspicious whenever it landed on Vivian. She climbed in and sat across from Nathaniel, on leather softer than anything she had ever touched. The car rolled through the streets of Los Angeles, from the slum where she lived to the tree-lined roads of Beverly Hills. With every mile, it was a different world. The houses grew larger, the lawns grew greener, the fences grew higher. When the car stopped in front of a massive iron gate stamped with a double-headed eagle, Vivian felt as if she had stepped into a film. The gate swung open, revealing a grand white estate with marble columns, a fountain in the center of the courtyard, and angel statues standing guard on either side of the drive. This was not a home. This was a palace. She thought of her one-bedroom apartment, with rotten floorboards, walls stained with damp, and a window propped with a wooden stick so it would not fall. That entire apartment could have fit inside the living room of this place. "This is my home," Nathaniel said, his voice even, as if living in a mansion like this were perfectly ordinary. Vivian did not answer. She did not know what to say. The front doors opened before they even reached the steps. An older woman appeared, silver hair coiled high, a face lined with wrinkles but eyes a bright jewel-like blue. She wore a simple wool dress, and she did not look like a servant, and she did not look like the owner either. She looked like a grandmother out of a fairy tale. "Nathaniel," she exclaimed, her Russian accent heavy, and she hurried forward to wrap him in an embrace despite the injuries. "My foolish son, I told you not to go alone." "I am fine, Mama," Nathaniel replied, his voice softening in a way that startled Vivian. Thanks to her. The older woman's blue eyes shifted to Vivian. Then she stepped closer and took Vivian's hands in her warm, wrinkled fingers. "You saved my son," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You are family now. I am Irina." Vivian stood there, not knowing how to respond. Family. She did not know what that word meant. Her birth mother had abandoned her in the fire when Vivian was 8, running outside alone and never coming back. Vivian had grown up believing she was unworthy of love. "Thank you," she managed, her voice rough. Irina smiled and patted Vivian's cheek, as if Vivian were a granddaughter she had not seen in years. Vivian was led to her own room on the second floor. The room was bigger than her entire apartment, with a king-size bed dressed in crisp white sheets, red velvet curtains, and a balcony overlooking a rose garden. She stood in the middle of it, feeling out of place, like a fish tossed into a goldfish bowl. Too lavish, too beautiful, and empty. A gilded cage, she thought. No matter how beautiful it was still a cage. That night, Vivian lay on the softest bed she had ever known, and still she could not sleep. She tossed and turned for hours, thinking about Lily, about Victor, about Marcus, about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Finally, she gave up on sleep, slipped out of bed, and stepped into the hallway. The mansion was silent, like a cemetery at night. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor as she wandered without aim. And then she heard it. A scream, weak, muffled, coming from somewhere below, the basement. She knew she should not go down there, but her feet moved toward the stairs anyway, as if an invisible force were pulling her. She crept down one step at a time, the sounds growing clearer. Moaning, begging, and then a sharp crack, dry as bone breaking. She stopped at a half-open iron door and peered through the narrow gap. Nathaniel stood there, sleeves rolled up, his hands smeared with blood. In front of him, a man was tied to a chair, his face swollen, blood running from his nose and mouth. Nathaniel was saying something in Russian, his tone so cold and ruthless, Vivian could not believe this was the same man who had let his mother hug her just hours earlier. Nathaniel lifted his hand, and Vivian saw a pair of pliers gleaming under the light. The man in the chair screamed. Vivian took a step back and brushed the wall by accident. The sound was small, but it was enough to make Nathaniel turn his head. Gray eyes met blue-gray eyes through the crack in the door. He did not look surprised. He did not look ashamed. He did not try to hide what she had just seen. He set the pliers down, walked to the door, and pushed it open wider. "Do you want to know who I am?" he asked, calm as if he were offering her tea. "This is me, and I will burn the whole world to protect my own." Then he turned back and resumed his unfinished work, leaving Vivian standing there with the question spinning in her mind. Was she one of his own? 3 days passed like a strange dream Vivian could not decide was beautiful or a nightmare. She ate the finest meals of her life, cooked by a private chef, slept on a bed soft as clouds, and was treated by Irina as if she were a blood daughter. But every night, she still saw Nathaniel with blood on his hands and the gleaming pliers in the basement. She knew she was living with a monster. The question was, that monster was protecting her. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Vivian knocked on Nathaniel's door to change his bandages. That was her job under their agreement. Private doctor, private nurse, the perfect role to explain her presence in the mansion if anyone asked. "Come in," his voice called from inside. She pushed the door open and stepped in. Nathaniel sat in a chair by the window, his shirt unbuttoned to reveal the wrappings around his chest and shoulder. The late afternoon sun fell across him, sharpening the hard lines of his face, and Vivian found herself noticing, despite everything, that if he were not a mafia boss, he would be the most handsome man she had ever seen. She shoved the thought away and came closer with the medical kit. "Hold still," she said. "Professional. I am going to check the wound." She removed the old bandage and inspected the stitches on his shoulder. Healing well, no sign of infection. She worked in silence, her hands steady even though she knew these hands had killed people. The hands she was touching had broken someone's bones just a few nights ago. When she reached for the fresh roll of gauze, her sleeve slid up, exposing the scars on her wrist. Not the marks of self-harm, but uneven, crosswise cuts, as if someone had used a knife on her skin again and again. She did not realize Nathaniel was watching, not until she felt the silence grow heavier than it had been. She looked up. His gray eyes were fixed on her wrist, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jump beneath his skin. He did not ask. He did not speak. He only stared, and in that stare, she saw something she did not expect. Anger, not at her, at whoever had done that to her. She pulled her sleeve down and continued the bandaging in silence. That night, Vivian could not sleep. She went out onto her balcony and looked down at the rose garden under the moonlight, and she saw Nathaniel standing on the balcony next to hers, a glass of liquor in his hand, his gaze distant in the darkness. "You cannot sleep either?" he asked without turning his head. "No," she answered. Silence. Then, she did not know why. Maybe because the darkness hid her face. Maybe because exhaustion had cracked every wall she had built. Vivian began to speak. "Marcus," she said, her voice small as wind. "My ex-husband. He is the one who made those scars." Nathaniel said nothing. He only turned to face her, looked at her, and waited. 3 years, she continued, her voice shaking but not stopping. 3 years I lived with him. The first time he hit me was 1 month after the wedding. I thought it was an accident. The second time, I thought it was my fault. The 10th time, I did not think anything anymore. I only tried to survive each day. She told him about the beatings, about nights curled up in a corner of the bathroom, about the time he used a knife to cut her wrists because she dared to look at another man, about the time he kicked her down the stairs and she lay there for 2 hours with broken ribs before she could crawl to the phone, about the time she almost died because he choked her until she passed out, and she woke on the floor with him beside her, crying and begging forgiveness. Nathaniel listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer pity. He did not say meaningless things like, "I understand," or "I am sorry for what you went through." He only listened, and that silence, somehow, was what Vivian needed more than any comfort. When she finished, her throat raw from too many words, Nathaniel asked only one question. "Is he still alive?" "He is a cop," Vivian answered bitterly. "He is untouchable. I reported him. No one believed me. His co-workers protected him. The court gave him a warning, and I am the one who had to run." Silence. Then Nathaniel spoke, his voice cold as ice. "No one is untouchable to me." Before Vivian could react, a gunshot tore the night apart, then another, and another. The lights in the mansion went dead. Darkness swallowed everything. Vivian had not even understood what was happening before Nathaniel was at her side. He vaulted over the railing, separating the balconies, grabbed her arm, and pulled her into the room. "Get on the floor," he ordered, shoving her into the darkest corner. What is happening? Victor, he growled, drawing a gun from somewhere she had not seen. He sent men, more shots, screaming, glass breaking. The mansion sounded like it was being attacked by an army. Nathaniel planted himself in front of her, his back a wall shielding her from danger. His shoulder was still bandaged. The wound was not healed, but he stood there, gun in hand, ready to shoot anyone who came through the door. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. The door blew open. Nathaniel fired. 2 shots. A shadow dropped. Another rushed in, a knife flashing. Nathaniel dodged, but not fast enough. The blade sliced his shoulder, right through the old wound. He snarled with pain, but still he twisted and drove a fist into the attacker's face with shocking force. The man went down, and Nathaniel put a bullet through the man's head. Silence. Then Dimitri's voice rang out from the hallway. "Boss, we are secure." 2 men. Took them both down. Nathaniel lowered the gun and turned back to Vivian. Blood was seeping through the bandage on his shoulder, dripping onto the floor. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. She shook her head, unable to speak. Her hands trembled as she stood and moved closer to him. "Sit down," she said, her voice shaking. "Your wound opened again." He sat on the edge of the bed. Vivian grabbed the medical kit and began to peel away the blood-soaked bandage. Her hands were shaking. For the first time, her hands were shaking while she treated a patient. "You are afraid," Nathaniel said. "Not a question." "I am afraid of losing you," she blurted out before she could stop herself. Silence. She did not dare look up. She focused on the wound, on stopping the bleeding, on anything except the gray eyes watching her. And in that moment, Vivian realized a terrifying truth. She was feeling safe beside one of the most dangerous men in this city, safer than she had ever felt in her life. And that frightened her more than Marcus ever had. Because this time, she was not afraid of being hurt. She was afraid of losing him. A week passed in the mansion like a dream Vivian did not want to wake from. After the night of the attack, security was tightened twice over. Men dressed in black patrolled everywhere. More cameras appeared in every corner, and Dimitri barely left Nathaniel's side. But in the middle of all that chaos and danger, something strange had begun to grow between Vivian and the Mafia boss. They fell into a rhythm of their own. Every morning, Vivian went into Nathaniel's room to check his wound. The cut from the knife that night was healing. Slowly, under her careful hands, she changed the dressings, checked for signs of infection, and he sat in silence while she worked. Sometimes they talked, about small things, about the weather, about dinner, about the book Irina was reading. They did not talk about Victor. They did not talk about Lily. They did not talk about Marcus, as if there were an unspoken agreement that mornings were for pretending this life was normal. But in the afternoons, everything changed. "You need to learn how to protect yourself," Nathaniel said on the 3rd day, leading her down to the gym in the basement. Not the basement where he tortured people. A different basement, bright and gleaming, filled with expensive exercise equipment. Vivian thought it made sense. After nearly being killed twice, she should know how to fight back instead of only running. Nathaniel taught her the basics. How to stand, how to hold her balance, how to form a fist so she would not break her fingers. He was patient in a way that surprised her, repeating each movement again and again until she understood. "You are holding it wrong," he said on the 5th day, stepping in behind her. Then his hand settled at her waist, adjusting her posture. She felt the heat of him through the thin fabric of her shirt, caught the scent of sandalwood cologne and something else she could only think of as the smell of him. Her heart sped up. His breath was close to her ear. "Turn your hips when you punch." His voice was lower than usual. "The power comes from here." His hand pressed lightly against her hip, "Not from your arm." She turned her head, and their faces were only a few centimeters apart. His gray eyes were darker than she remembered, looking at her with something she did not dare name. "Try again," he said, hoarse. She punched the heavy bag, this time, much harder. "Good," he said, but he did not remove his hand from her waist. From the corner of the room, Dimitri watched. The bodyguard had followed Nathaniel for more than 20 years, from when he was an 18-year-old boy who had lost his father and been forced to take over an empire. Dimitri had seen Nathaniel kill without hesitation, seen him so cold it was terrifying, seen him treat women like things to be used and discarded. But he had never seen Nathaniel look at anyone the way he was looking at this nurse, and he had never seen his boss truly smile. Not until now. On the afternoon of the 7th day, they were in the gym as usual. Vivian had improved noticeably. She could punch harder, dodge faster, And most importantly, she no longer shook when Nathaniel stood close. "You learn fast," he said, handing her a bottle of water. "I have good motivation," she answered, half joking. "I do not want to be killed." He looked at her, and she saw the corner of his mouth lift. Not the cold smile from their first meeting. A different smile, a smile she had begun to wait for each day. Her phone vibrated. Vivian looked at the screen. An unknown number. She was about to ignore it, but a notification appeared. A video message. She opened it, and her world collapsed. On the screen, Lily knelt on a concrete floor. Her sister, the only family she had left, was kneeling there with a bruised face, a split lip, dried blood on her forehead. She was crying. Soft, broken sobs like a kitten left behind. Then a voice came through. A man's voice, cold and cruel. "Hello, nurse. You must miss your sister. You have 1 week. Nathaniel dies. Your sister lives. Nathaniel lives. Your sister dies. Choose." The video ended. The phone slipped from Vivian's hand. She stood there, frozen, unable to breathe. 1 week. They had given her 1 week to choose between the man standing in front of her and her own sister. 1 week to decide who lived and who died. Her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees on the gym floor, her hands pressed to the cold ground as if she were trying to keep herself from falling into nothing. "Vivian." Nathaniel's voice reached her, distant, as if it came from another world. She did not answer. She could not answer. He picked up the phone and watched the video. She did not look, but she knew his face was hardening, his gray eyes darkening like a sky before a storm. "My sister," she whispered, her voice breaking apart. "What do I do? I cannot. I cannot." She did not know what she was saying. Words spilled out without order, tangled with sobs she did not realize were clawing up her throat. Then a hand gripped her shoulder. Strong, steady. "Vivian, look at me." She lifted her head. Nathaniel was kneeling in front of her, gray eyes locked on hers. "I will find Lily," he said, his voice firm as steel. "I will bring your sister back, but you have to trust me. Can you do that? Trust him. Trust a mafia boss. Trust a killer. Trust a man she had known for little more than a week." But looking into those gray eyes, Vivian did not see a killer. She saw the man who had stood in front of her when bullets flew. She saw the man who had listened to her tell 3 years of hell without judgment. She saw the man who had looked at her scars and not asked, only clenched his jaw as if he were holding back anger meant for the one who had hurt her. "I trust you," she said, her voice trembling, but certain. Nathaniel nodded. He stood and pulled her to her feet. 1 week, he said, his voice ice, but his eyes on her were warm. "Long enough for me to burn Victor's entire empire to the ground." Vivian held his gaze. The eyes of a killer, of a mafia boss, of the man who had just promised to save her sister. And for the first time in her life, she truly wanted to believe someone. The 3rd day of the deadline. 4 days left to save Lily. Vivian counted every hour the way you count each drop of blood seeping from a wound that never truly heals. She barely slept, and every time she closed her eyes she saw her sister's bruised face, heard the weak crying echoing from that cursed video. But Nathaniel had told her she had to trust him. And she was trying. That morning, Nathaniel called her into his study and laid out the plan. Tonight, he would host a charity gala at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. On the surface, it was a fundraiser for orphaned children. Underneath, it was a chance to meet allies, gather information on Victor's location, and find out where he was holding Lily. "You will go with me," Nathaniel said. "Not a question. As my girlfriend." Vivian wanted to argue, but she understood the logic behind the decision. She could not stay at the mansion alone while Victor was still hunting, and her appearance at Nathaniel's side would anger Victor, might push him into making a mistake. That afternoon, a team of strangers arrived in her room. A designer, a makeup artist, a hairstylist. They worked on her as if she were a statue being carved. She sat still and let them pull and smooth and paint, feeling as if she were drifting through a surreal dream. When they finally left, Vivian stood before the full-length mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back. The black evening gown clung to her body as if it had been made for her, because it had. Silk flowed down her like a waterfall of night. The open back cut just deep enough to be sensual without being brazen. Her hair was styled in soft waves, falling over one shoulder. Her makeup was natural, but it brought out the blue-gray of her eyes she had always thought were plain. For the first time in 27 years, Vivian looked into the mirror and did not see a victim. She did not see the girl abandoned in a fire. She did not see the woman beaten for 3 years. She saw a beautiful woman. Strong, surviving. She stepped out of her room and walked down the hallway to the top of the grand staircase. Below, Nathaniel was waiting in a black 3-piece suit, hair neatly styled, looking like a prince pulled from a fashion magazine. He was speaking with Dimitri, his back to the stairs. Vivian began to descend. The click of her heels sounded soft against the marble. Nathaniel turned and went still. She continued down, one step at a time, feeling his gaze like fire on her skin. He did not move. He did not blink. He only stood there and looked at her as if she were the only thing left in the world. Dimitri cleared his throat. Nathaniel did not react. Dimitri cleared it again, louder. Nathaniel still did not react. Vivian reached the last step and stopped in front of him. Her heart was beating so fast she was afraid he could hear it. "You," Nathaniel started, then stopped. He, the infamous Mafia boss, the man who could order someone killed without changing expression, could not find the words. "You are beautiful." Simple. Only 2 words. But the way he looked at her, the way his voice roughened, the way his hand tightened at his side as if he were restraining himself, was not simple at all. "Thank you," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. The gala at the Beverly Wilshire felt like a dream built for the wealthy. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm golden light. Classical music rose from a live orchestra. Hundreds of guests in expensive formal wear laughed and talked, champagne glasses in hand like mandatory accessories. Vivian entered at Nathaniel's side, her hand resting in the crook of his arm. Every eye turned toward them. She caught the whispers. "Who is she?" "Volkov's new one." "Who is she?" Nathaniel offered no explanation. He simply guided her through the crowd as if she were a queen and he were the king. Powerful men bowed their heads in greeting. Beautiful women looked at her with undisguised envy. And Vivian, the orphan who had grown up in an institution, felt as if she were playing a role she had no right to wear. Then he appeared. Viktor Kozlov approached them with a friendly smile, as if he were not the man holding her sister, not the man who had sent killers after her, not the man counting down the days until she had to choose between Nathaniel and Lily. "Nathaniel," Viktor said, taking his hand, warm and hearty. "Good to see you healthy. I heard you had an accident." "Rumors are exaggerated," Nathaniel replied, his voice calm as if he were discussing the weather. "I am still alive, clearly." Viktor laughed, and then his gaze slid to Vivian. She felt it like a poisonous tongue across her skin. "And who is this?" "You have good taste, Nathaniel. She is special." The way he said special made Vivian shiver. He knew who she was. He was playing cat and mouse. "Vivian," she introduced herself, steadier than she felt. "Nathaniel's girlfriend." Viktor's mouth curved. "A pleasure. I hope we will have the chance to talk much more." "Never," she thought, but she only smiled. Viktor drifted away, dissolving into the crowd like a ghost. Vivian let out a breath, but Nathaniel's hand tightened lightly around hers, as if reminding her the danger was not gone, and it arrived sooner than she expected. She was standing alone by the champagne table, while Nathaniel went to speak with an ally, when a hand clamped around her arm and dragged her into a shadowed corner behind a marble pillar. "Marcus." "You!" he snarled, face flushed, breath thick with alcohol. He wore an event security uniform, and she knew he must have pulled strings to get the post just to reach her. "What game are you playing with the Russian? Who do you think you are? You are mine. Did you forget?" He crushed her wrist, so hard she thought bone might crack. Pain, familiar, memory surging like a tidal wave. "Let go, Marcus," she said through her teeth. "No," he laughed. "You think having some mafia thug protecting you means you can escape me. I am the police. I am untouchable. And you will always be mine." Then a voice came from behind Marcus, cold as ice, dangerous as a blade at the throat. "Take your hand off her, or lose your hand." "I will not say it twice." Marcus spun around, his face draining of color when he saw Nathaniel standing behind him. The mafia boss carried no weapon, yet the cold gray of his eyes was more dangerous than any gun. Dimitri stood just behind, his hand already slipped inside his suit jacket, ready to draw at any second. "This is personal." Marcus tried to keep his voice steady, but Vivian heard the tremor underneath. "Between me and my ex-wife. She is not your wife anymore," Nathaniel said, stepping closer, each slow step like a panther closing in on prey. "And she is here with me, at my event, on my territory." Marcus glanced around. A few men in black had appeared as if from thin air, forming a discreet circle around them. He was a cop, But here, he was only a small fish in an ocean of sharks. He let go of Vivian. "Fine," he said, taking a step back. But before he turned away, he looked straight into Vivian's eyes, and she saw hatred burning there. "This is not over." Then he vanished into the crowd, his security uniform dissolving among hundreds of guests. Vivian stood there, her legs threatening to give out. She felt as if every ounce of strength had been drained from her body. Only minutes in Marcus's presence were enough to drag her back into those years of hell, into nights curled up in a corner, into the times she had been sure she would die by his hands. Nathaniel's hand settled on her back, warm and steady. "Come with me," he said gently, not as an order. She nodded, not trusting her voice if she opened her mouth. Nathaniel guided her through the crowd, up a staircase, and out a door that led to the rooftop. The night air of Los Angeles rushed over her face, cool and clean, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens below. The city spread out before them like a sea of glittering lights, millions of tiny points like stars that had fallen to the earth. Vivian stepped to the railing, her hands gripping the cold metal. She was shaking, not from the wind, not from the cold, but because every memory she had tried to bury was clawing its way back up like the dead from a grave. She heard the soft rustle of fabric, then felt warmth as Nathaniel draped his suit jacket over her shoulders. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not offer empty comfort. He only stood beside her in silence, like a wall between her and the world. They stood there for a long time, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. Vivian did not count. She only focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. "Why are you protecting me?" she finally asked, her voice rough. "The deal was only that I pretend to be your doctor. You do not have to." "Do you think I know?" Nathaniel cut in, his voice low as distant thunder. She turned to look at him. He was staring out over the city, gray eyes reflecting millions of lights like shards of broken glass. 36 years, he continued, so softly she had to lean closer to hear. 36 years I have lived in this world. I have money, power, men willing to die for me, but no one." He stopped, as if searching for the word. "No one has ever thrown themselves off a cliff to save me. No one has ever looked at me the way you do." "The way I do?" Vivian asked, confused. Nathaniel turned to her, and now his gray eyes held hers. "Not fear. Not greed. Not calculation. Weighing what I can give you. You only." He hesitated, and Vivian realized it was the first time she had ever seen this mafia boss not know what to say. "You only look at me. Like I am ordinary. Like I am human." Silence. The wind moved around them, carrying jasmine and the scent of the city at night. The lights below flickered as if dancing to music only the two of them could hear. Nathaniel lifted his hand, rough fingers gently tipping her chin upward. She did not pull back. She did not want to. He looked at her for a long moment, gray eyes searching hers for something, permission, rejection, any sign that told him what she wanted. Then he kissed her, slow, gentle, as if she were something precious that could shatter at any moment, as if he were asking instead of taking. His mouth was warm and soft, the complete opposite of the cold man he showed the world, and Vivian kissed him back. She did not know why. She should not do this. He was the mafia. He was a killer. He was dangerous in every meaning of the word. But when her lips met his, when his hand slid into her hair, when their bodies drew closer under the Los Angeles moon, she did not think about any of it. She thought only that for the first time in her life, she felt wanted. Not owned, not controlled, wanted. When they parted, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers, his breath hot against her mouth. "This may be the biggest mistake of your life," he whispered. "I know," she said. "I am not a good man. I know. I could bring you more danger than anyone you have ever met." "I know," she said a third time, then lifted her hand and touched his face. "But you are also the only man who has ever made me feel safe." Under the Los Angeles moon, surrounded by the sea of city lights, Vivian understood a truth she could not deny. She was falling in love with a monster, and this time, she did not want to run. They rode back to the mansion in silence. The Rolls-Royce glided through the night streets of Los Angeles, but the air inside the car felt thick enough to choke on. Vivian sat beside Nathaniel, their shoulders touching, the warmth of his body traveling into hers like electricity. She could still taste the kiss on her mouth, still hear her heart beating wild in her chest. When the car stopped in front of the estate, Nathaniel stepped out first, then turned back and offered her his hand. She took it, and he did not let go as they walked inside. They moved through the grand foyer, up the stairs, down the hallway. No one spoke. There was nothing they needed to say. They stopped at her door. Nathaniel looked at her, gray eyes asking a question his mouth did not. Vivian did not answer with words. She only tightened her grip on his hand and pulled him into the room. That night, they were together. Not rushed, not frantic. Only a tenderness Vivian had never believed a man like Nathaniel could possess. He touched her as if she were glass, something that might shatter at any moment. He kissed every scar on her body as if he were apologizing for the one who had caused them. He looked at her with gray eyes that were no longer cold, but blazing with a fire she had never seen in anyone. And Vivian, for the first time in her life, felt cherished, not possessed the way Marcus had possessed her, not treated like an object to be used and discarded. Cherished, held with care, loved in a way she had never thought she deserved. And Nathaniel, the 36-year-old mafia boss, for the first time let someone stay the night, not because of a transaction, not because of obligation, but because he wanted to, because he needed to, because when he closed his eyes, he wanted only her face. And when he woke, he wanted her to be the first thing he saw. They fell asleep in each other's arms, bodies intertwined like two final pieces that had wandered for years before finding their match. The next morning, Vivian woke to sunlight slipping through the curtains. She reached across the bed, searching for Nathaniel's warmth, but her hand touched only cold sheets. She sat up fast, her heart tightening. He was not here. The space beside her was empty, the pillow without the imprint of his head, as if last night had never happened. He regrets it. The thought cut through her like a knife. He regrets it and he left. I was just one night. Just a mistake. She swallowed, forcing the dark thoughts back down. She looked around the room and saw Nathaniel's white dress shirt draped over a chair. She grabbed it and slipped it on, his cologne wrapping around her like an embrace. She stepped out of the room and walked down the hall. The mansion was quiet in the early morning, only birdsong drifting in from the garden. Then she heard voices, from Nathaniel's office. She moved closer and stopped outside the half-open door. Tonight, Nathaniel's voice carried through, cold and commanding. We hit tonight. No more waiting. Boss, are you sure? Dimitri's voice. Victor's force is not small. And there is the Santos cartel, too. I do not care, Nathaniel replied. Lily is in Warehouse 17, at the port of Long Beach. Dimitri has confirmed it. We go in, we get her out, and we burn down everything Victor has built. Vivian went rigid outside the door. Lily, Warehouse 17, the port of Long Beach. They knew where her sister was. He knew where her sister was. She shoved the door open and stepped into the room. Nathaniel turned, and she saw a flicker of surprise cross his face before it disappeared behind the familiar cold mask. You know where my sister is? Her voice shook with anger. How long have you known? Silence. Dimitri looked at Nathaniel, then at Vivian, then quietly stepped out, closing the door behind him. Nathaniel faced her without flinching. 3 days. 3 days. She had cried for 3 days. She had not slept for 3 days. She had worried herself sick for 3 days. And he had known the whole time. 3 days? She shouted, her voice cracking. You knew where my sister was for 3 days and you did not tell me? Nathaniel rose from behind the desk and walked toward her. She stepped back, fury and pain and betrayal burning through her. I did not tell you because you would do something stupid, he said, his voice calm, but his eyes were not. You would run there alone. You would try to save your sister without thinking about the consequences. You would do something insane. She is my sister. And you are. He stopped, his jaw tightening. You are the one I cannot lose. Vivian stood there, anger still boiling in her chest, but his words hit like a bucket of ice. She looked at him and saw the hurt in his gray eyes that he was trying to hide. Nathaniel stepped closer, until he was right in front of her. Because if I told you, you would do something stupid, he said, his voice dropping, like throwing yourself off a cliff to save a burning mafia bastard. And he hesitated, as if the next words were harder than any killing order he had ever given. I cannot lose you. Vivian looked at Nathaniel, anger still burning in her chest, but what he had just said struck her like an arrow straight through the heart. He could not lose her. The cold mafia boss, the man who killed without hesitation, the man the whole city feared, had just admitted that he could not lose her, but she could not let it soften her. Not now. Not when her sister was being held somewhere, waiting to die. That is my sister, she shouted, tears starting to rise despite her effort to hold them back. The only one I have left. After my parents died, after the years in the orphanage, After Marcus almost killed me, Lily is the only one I have, and you kept it from me for 3 days." Nathaniel stood there and took every word like fists to the chest. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists, but he did not argue back. "And you are the only one I cannot lose," he exploded, his voice echoing off the walls. "Do you understand, Vivian? 36 years I have lived in this world and I have feared nothing, not death, not enemies, not losing money, losing power, losing everything I have built. But when I think about losing you," he stopped, his voice catching, "I am afraid." Silence. Vivian's anger dimmed, like a fire drowned in water. She looked at him and saw the strongest man she had ever met standing in front of her with a fragility she had never expected. He had just admitted fear. For a man like Nathaniel, that was harder than admitting love. "You cannot keep me in a gilded cage and call it protection," she said, her voice softer but still firm. "You cannot decide for me what I get to know, what I get to do. That is not protection, that is control. And I have had enough control from Marcus for a lifetime." Nathaniel closed his eyes, as if her words had found the one place that could hurt him. "I do not." He opened his eyes and looked at her with pain. "I do not know any other way. All my life, the only way to protect someone was to hide them away, to keep them far from danger. I do not know." She stepped closer, slowly, one step at a time, until she stood right in front of him, close enough to count each dark lash against his skin. She lifted her hand and took his. "Then learn," she said gently. "With me." Nathaniel looked down at her hand, holding his, then up into her face. Something shifted in his eyes. The hardness eased, giving way to something softer, something more human. "All right," he said. "We do it together." They sat at the desk, spread the warehouse map out, and began to plan. Dimitri was called in, along with a few of Nathaniel's most trusted commanders. They broke down every entrance, every guard post, every possible scenario. Then Vivian made her suggestion. "Let me be the bait." Everyone in the room turned to stare at her. Nathaniel went still. "No," he said immediately, his voice sharp as a blade. "Hear me first," Vivian said, calm. "Marcus is looking for me. He wants me. Victor knows I matter to you. If I let Marcus catch me, he will take me to the warehouse to hand me over to Victor, and while they focus on me, you strike." "No," Nathaniel repeated, standing. "You will not put yourself in their hands. This is my sister." Vivian stood too, facing him. "And this is my body. You do not get to decide for me." They held each other's gaze, neither willing to back down. Dimitri and the others stayed silent, not daring to step between the boss and the woman bold enough to challenge him. Finally, Nathaniel exhaled, heavy as if he were carrying 1,000 pounds. "Fine," he said, tension tight in his voice. "But on my terms. A bulletproof vest under your jacket, a GPS tracker in your shoe. And if things go wrong, you listen to me. No arguing. No heroics. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said. That afternoon, Vivian put on the bulletproof vest. It was heavy and uncomfortable, pressing tight against her chest, but she did not complain. She pulled on a jacket over it, hiding the protection. Dimitri planted the tracker in her shoe and checked the signal twice to make sure it worked. When she stepped out the front doors of the mansion, Nathaniel was there, waiting. She stopped in front of him. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say. That she was grateful, that she trusted him, that last night had been the most beautiful night of her life, that she was afraid, that she loved him, but she did not say any of them. "Do not die," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Nathaniel looked at her, gray eyes deep as the ocean. "You either," he answered. Then she turned and walked into the car that was waiting, vanishing into the Los Angeles night. The port of Long Beach at midnight felt like a graveyard for giant ships. Rusted containers were stacked on top of one another, forming a steel maze, while the sickly yellow light from a few old lampposts threw dancing ghosts across cracked concrete. The smell of sea salt mixed with engine oil and rust filled the air, so heavy Vivian felt as if she were breathing through wet cloth. She stood in a dark passage between 2 rows of containers, her heart hammering beneath the bulletproof vest. According to the plan, she would let Marcus find her here. The information Nathaniel had deliberately leaked through one of his planted men had reached Marcus, that Vivian would come to the port alone to look for her sister. She did not have to wait long. Heavy footsteps sounded behind her. Then a familiar voice, soaked in malice, made her blood turn to ice. "Finally you came back to me." Marcus stepped out of the darkness, triumph curling on his mouth. 2 men followed him, guns in their hands. He thought he had won. He thought she was stupid enough to hand herself over, exactly as planned. Vivian did not resist when Marcus grabbed her arm and dragged her along. She let him lead her through the container maze to a large warehouse at the edge of the port. The heavy iron door opened, and she stepped into hell. The warehouse was as vast as an aircraft hangar, the ceiling soaring high above, light from a few dangling bulbs carving the space into patches of brightness and shadow. And in the center, seated on a chair like a throne, was Viktor Kozlov. He looked older than she had imagined. Over 40, salt and pepper hair, a bony face with gray eyes as cold as dead fish. He wore an expensive suit, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of red wine in his hand, red as blood. Beautiful nurse. Viktor rose and moved closer. His voice was smooth, yet threatening, like the hiss of a venomous snake. At last we meet. You have caused me a great deal of trouble. Vivian said nothing. She watched the room, counting Viktor's men. 15, 20, too many. She hoped Nathaniel and his people were already in position. You know, Viktor went on, circling her like a predator. I worked for Nathaniel for 15 years. 15 years I was his right hand. And what did he pay me with? A handful of miserable coins while he sat on the throne. He stopped in front of her, his eyes flashing with something unhinged. So, I took what I deserved. $20 million. And a deal with the Santos cartel to topple that throne. He laughed. Marcus here is my puppet. I paid him to kill Nathaniel in the accident, and to watch you, the little girl who dared to stick her nose into my business. Vivian glanced at Marcus. He stood there with the blank look of a man who had just realized he was only a piece on the board. But he did not care. He cared only that she was within his reach. This girl is my insurance, Viktor continued. Nathaniel will not dare touch me while I have you. He loves you, he scoffed. Pathetic. The most powerful mafia boss on the West Coast brought to his knees by an ordinary nurse. He snapped his fingers. A side door opened, and 2 men hauled someone out. Vivian's heart seemed to stop. Lily. Her sister looked like a walking corpse. So thin her cheekbones jutted sharp, hair matted, clothes torn. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her lips split and cracked, bruises blooming across her skin. But she was alive. Sis, Lily sobbed when she saw Vivian. I am sorry, sis. I did not know. I did not know they would. It is okay, Vivian said, her voice shaking but forcing calm. I am here. I am going to get you out. Viktor burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the warehouse like a crow's cry. Touching. Truly touching. He clapped slowly, mocking. Too bad you will both die together tonight. Vivian tried to buy time. Just a few more minutes. Just until Nathaniel moved into position. He will come, she said. Nathaniel will come and he will kill you. Viktor's mouth curled. Then he did something that froze Vivian's blood. He clapped again, slowly. Each clap rang out like a funeral bell. Oh, I know, he said, delighted. I know he is out there. I know his plan. I know you are the bait. He leaned in, staring straight into her eyes. You think you are so smart, little nurse. You think you are bait. He laughed. You are the prey. Vivian understood. Too late. Viktor had known from the beginning. He let her come here. He let Nathaniel believe the plan was unfolding smoothly, because he had a plan of his own. Nathaniel! Viktor shouted, his voice booming through the warehouse. I know you are there. Come out, or I shoot this girl right now. Silence. Then the main doors opened. Nathaniel walked in, Dmitri and 10 men behind him. They held guns, but Viktor had more, and Viktor had hostages. Ah, finally, Viktor smiled. My former boss. Viktor, Nathaniel said, his voice cold as ice. Let her go. This is between me and you. I am afraid not. Viktor lifted a hand. Shoot. Everything happened in an instant. Gunfire erupted. But not from Nathaniel's side. From above. From Viktor's men already hidden on the scaffolding. Vivian saw Dmitri surge toward Nathaniel, shoving him aside. Then blood. Bright red blood blossomed across the loyal bodyguard's chest, like a deadly flower. Dmitri went down. No! Nathaniel roared. Chaos exploded. Gunshots. Screams. Bullets slamming into metal. Viktor stood there, in the middle of the burning hell, smiling. Now, he said, we play by my rules. The warehouse became hell in a blink. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Bullets tore through the air, sparks bursting from metal when rounds slammed into containers. Nathaniel's men scattered, finding cover behind crates and dead machinery, firing back at Victor's shooters on the scaffolding. The Santos cartel poured in through a rear door, tattooed men with submachine guns, turning the fight into a slaughter. Vivian hit the floor when the first shots exploded, the survival instinct she had learned through years with Marcus snapping on like a reflex. She crawled on her stomach, searching for cover behind a rusted forklift. Her eyes cut through the chaos, searching for Lily. Her sister was curled on the concrete, both hands over her head, screaming in terror. "Lily!" Vivian shouted, trying to cut through the gunfire. "Crawl to me." Lily lifted her head, eyes drowned in tears, but she heard. She started to crawl toward Vivian, inch by inch, while bullets flew overhead like deadly rain. Through the chaos, Vivian saw Nathaniel. He was like a monster finally unchained, charging across the battlefield with a gun in his hand, dropping anyone who got in his way. A cartel man burst from the left. Nathaniel pivoted and put one round into the man's chest. Another came from the right. He dodged the bullet as if he could see it coming, then fired back twice in rapid succession. He was looking for her. Those gray eyes swept the crowd, searching with a frantic hunger. Then a bullet found him. Vivian saw Nathaniel jerk hard backward, blood spraying from his shoulder. The old wound, the same spot. He staggered, nearly falling, but his free hand caught the edge of a container, holding him upright, and he did not stop. He kept moving forward, gun still firing, as if the bullet were nothing more than a mosquito bite. Lily reached Vivian, her body shaking uncontrollably. Vivian wrapped her arms around her sister and pulled her deeper behind the forklift. "Stay here," she said into Lily's ear. "Do not move. I will come back." "Where are you going?" Lily clutched at her, eyes wide with horror. Vivian looked toward Dimitri's body. The loyal guard was down, not moving, blood spreading into a dark pool beneath him. If Vivian did nothing, he would die. "Someone needs me," she said. "Stay here." She crawled out from cover, weaving through bodies and debris, until she reached Dimitri. He was still breathing, but it was thin and broken. Blood poured from the bullet hole in his chest, dark and thick. Nurse mode snapped on. Vivian tore fabric from the shirt of a corpse nearby, making a thick wad. She pressed it down over Dimitri's wound with her full body weight, trying to stop the bleeding. "You cannot die," she said through her teeth, eyes fixed on the wound. "Do you hear me? You cannot die. You are the only family he has. Nathaniel needs you." Dimitri groaned, eyes fluttering open. He looked at her, lips moving as if he wanted to say something. "Do not talk," she ordered. "Save your strength. The medics will come." She did not know if that was true. She only knew she had to keep him alive. Then a hand seized her hair and yanked her back hard. She screamed with pain, her hands tearing away from Dimitri's wound. Marcus. He hauled her upright and jammed the muzzle of a gun against her temple. His face was smeared with blood. She did not know if it was his or someone else's. His eyes wild like an animal driven into a corner. "You," he roared in her face, spit flying. "You think you can escape me. You think that Russian can save you. Marcus, let go." She tried to keep her voice steady, even as her heart hammered. "No," he yanked her hair tighter. "If I cannot have you, nobody can. Do you hear me? Nobody." He is gone, Vivian realized. The pressure, the failure, the collapse of his plan had shoved him over the edge. "Let her go." Nathaniel's voice hit like thunder. He stood 10 steps away, gun aimed at Marcus. His shoulder was soaked with blood, his face pale from loss, but his grip on the weapon did not tremble at all. Marcus laughed, a crazed laugh cutting through the thinning gunfire. "Shoot," he screamed. "You shoot and I pull the trigger. She dies first. You want that." Nathaniel did not move. The gun stayed trained on Marcus, but he did not fire. He could not. Not with Vivian's life hanging by a thread, a deadlock. Then Vivian saw a figure move behind Marcus, small, shaking, but holding a metal bar. Lily, the weak sister, the addict, the battered girl, the sister Vivian had always protected. The sister standing behind Marcus with the bar raised high. Lily swung. The metal crashed into Marcus's head with a brutal clang. He howled, his gun hand loosening, and he spun toward Lily. That was all Vivian needed. She ripped the gun from Marcus's hand. She turned. She aimed it at his face. Marcus stood there, blood spilling from the wound on his head, eyes wide with shock. For the first time in his life, he looked at her with fear. "Vivian," he stammered. "You would not dare." Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, From 3 years of hell, from nights curled in corners, from the scars across her body, from every time she had believed she would die by his hands. "This time," she said, her voice cold as ice, "I am not the victim." Vivian stood there, the gun aimed at Marcus, and time seemed to stop moving. The warehouse lay quiet around them, the shooting gone silent, leaving only the groans of the wounded and the ragged breathing of the living. But she heard none of it. She saw only Marcus's face, the face that had haunted her through 3 years of hell and 2 years after she escaped. Memory crashed over her like a tidal wave. The first night he hit her. She had apologized, thinking it was her fault for coming home late. The night he used a knife to cut her wrists because she dared to look at another man in the grocery store. She had told the doctor she did it to herself, too afraid of Marcus to speak the truth. The nights she curled up in the corner of the bathroom, praying he would not come, praying she would die and be done with it. The time he kicked her down the stairs and she lay there for 2 hours with broken ribs, believing it was the last day of her life. And now he was here, in front of her, under the muzzle of her gun. One bullet could end it all. Marcus sneered, blood streaming from the wound on his head. Even staring at death, he could not stop mocking her. "You will not shoot," he said, contempt thick in his voice. "You are weak. You have always been weak. That is why you need a man to protect you. First it was me. Now it is the Russian. You are nothing without a man." Vivian's finger tightened on the trigger. Just a little more pressure, and the bullet would fly. A bullet to end 3 years of hell. A bullet to avenge every scar on her body. A bullet so she would never have to fear him again. She could feel Nathaniel standing behind her. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not interfere. This was her decision. He understood that. Vivian looked into Marcus's eyes. The eyes that used to terrify her. The eyes she once believed would be the last thing she saw before she died. And she realized something. She was not afraid anymore. She took a deep breath. Then she lowered the gun. Marcus blinked, stunned. Then he laughed, a victorious laugh echoing through the warehouse. "See, weak. You will always be a—" "No." Vivian cut him off, her voice terrifyingly calm. "I am not weak. I just do not want to be like you." Marcus went silent. "You will live," she continued, staring straight into his eyes. "You will live in prison. You will learn what it feels like to be locked up, to be powerless, to be controlled by someone else. You will wake up every day knowing you have no power left. You will grow old inside 4 walls, and you will die there, alone, with no one remembering you." She tilted her head. "That is the punishment you deserve." Marcus stared at her, and for the first time she saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of death, fear of living, fear of the future she had just painted for him. Then Nathaniel stepped forward. He did not speak. He only punched. A blow so hard Marcus flew backward, his head cracking against the concrete with a dry, brutal sound. He lay there, unmoving. "She spared you," Nathaniel said, his voice cold as ice. "I do not." He turned to 2 of his men standing nearby. "Keep him alive. Tie him up. Federal agents will want to talk about corruption and trafficking." He paused. "And make sure he does not escape. At any cost." They nodded and dragged Marcus away like a sack of garbage. Nathaniel turned back to Vivian, but before he could speak, a sound from the back door made them both turn. Victor, the traitor, was trying to crawl out, one leg injured, leaving a red smear across the concrete. He no longer wore the arrogant confidence he had earlier. He was only a sewer rat trying to flee. Nathaniel started toward him. Slowly, each step echoing through the quiet warehouse. Victor heard. He turned, face pale with fear. "Nathaniel," he stammered, trying to crawl faster. "I can explain. We can negotiate. I know things. I can help you." Nathaniel did not stop. He came closer, stood over Victor, and looked down at the man who had betrayed him for 15 years. "You stole from me," Nathaniel said, calm as if reading a grocery list. "You worked with the cartel to overthrow me. You sent assassins to kill me. I could forgive all of that." Victor looked up, a spark of hope flashing in his eyes. "But you touched my people," Nathaniel said, cold enough to freeze the air. "You kidnapped her sister. You threatened her. You put a gun to her head." He raised his gun. "Nathaniel, please," Victor begged, tears running down his face. "I am sorry. One shot." Victor did not speak again. Nathaniel stood there for a moment, looking down at the traitor's body. Then he turned away, stepped through the spreading pool of blood, and went back to Vivian. "It is over," he said, his voice exhausted, but relieved. The dust settled. The bite of gun smoke thinned in the air, still thick with the stink of blood and metal. The warehouse was a graveyard now. Bodies scattered across cracked concrete, blood spreading into dark pools under sickly yellow light. The groans of the wounded were the only sound that broke the dead silence. Vivian stood there, the gun still in her hand, looking around as if she had just woken from a nightmare. Then she saw Lily. Her sister was curled behind the forklift, arms wrapped around her knees, trembling from head to toe. Vivian ran to her, dropped to her knees, and pulled that fragile body into her arms with everything she had left. "Lily," she whispered, tears spilling without control. "You are okay. You are okay." Lily sobbed against her, the sound breaking like glass shattering. She could not speak at first, only cry and cry, her body jerking with each ragged breath. "I am sorry," Lily finally managed, her voice choked. "I am sorry I dragged you into this. I did not know. I did not know who they were. I thought it was just a normal loan. Shh." Vivian tightened her hold, stroking Lily's tangled hair. "It is okay. You do not have to be sorry. You are alive. That is all that matters. Just that you are alive." They held each other in the wreckage, two orphaned sisters who had lost everything except each other, crying as if they were pouring out all the pain of the past years. Vivian cried from relief, from fear, from love for the sister she had thought she would lose forever. Sirens rose in the distance. Vivian lifted her head and saw Nathaniel's men carrying Dimitri out on a stretcher. The bodyguard was still unconscious, his face wax pale, but his chest was rising and falling. Vivian had kept him alive long enough. He would recover. Nathaniel stood farther away, leaning against a container pillar, one hand pressed to the bleeding wound on his shoulder. He did not come closer. He did not intrude on the sister's moment. He only stood there and watched, gray eyes tired but warm as he looked at Vivian holding Lily. More vehicles arrived. Police. But not ordinary police. Vivian recognized it in the way they nodded at Nathaniel's people, in the way they did not ask a single question. These were his. They would handle the scene. They would make sure the story was told the right way. A man in a black suit approached Nathaniel and murmured something. Nathaniel nodded, and the man walked over to Vivian. "Ms. Cross," he said, "professional. Marcus Webb has been arrested and is on his way to a federal detention facility. The FBI has full evidence of corruption, taking money from a criminal organization, and involvement in a human trafficking ring. His expected sentence is 25 years to life." Vivian lifted her head, not sure she had heard correctly. "He will go to prison?" "Federal prison," the man nodded. "No chance of pardon, no chance of reduction. He will die there." Vivian looked down at Lily in her arms, then up at the night sky through the warehouse roof, punched full of holes. She had not killed Marcus. She had chosen to spare him, and now he would live in a cage, powerless, controlled, exactly as he had done to her for 3 years. That was justice. She felt a hand settle on her shoulder, warm, familiar. She looked up and saw Nathaniel standing there, face smeared with blood and dust, his shoulder still bleeding through the makeshift bandage someone had wrapped around him. He looked like a man who had stepped out of hell, but his gray eyes held real worry. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. This man, a mafia boss, a killer, the man who had run into fire to save her, the man who had stood still and let her choose the fate of the one who tortured her, the man who had killed Victor because he dared to threaten her. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I just held a gun on my ex-husband. I just watched you kill a man. I almost lost my sister." She drew a deep breath. "I do not know if I am all right," Nathaniel nodded, not trying to soothe her with empty words. "But I know one thing," Vivian continued, her voice gentle but steady. "I want to be here, with you." Nathaniel did not speak. He only pulled her into his arms, held her tight, and pressed his mouth to the top of her head. Vivian closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath his chest, feeling the warmth of him wrap around her like armor. Lily was still in Vivian's arms. Nathaniel held them both, and in the blood-soaked wreckage of the warehouse, surrounded by bodies and the wail of sirens, Vivian felt, for the first time, like she had a family. A week passed like a hazy dream. Lily was taken to the most exclusive rehabilitation center in Los Angeles, a place with private doctors, rooms like a 5-star hotel, and a recovery program tailored to each patient. Nathaniel paid every cost without a word. When Vivian tried to refuse, He only looked at her with those gray eyes and said, "Your sister is your family. Your family is my family." And Vivian did not know how to answer that. Dmitri recovered faster than anyone expected. The loyal bodyguard woke after 2 days in a coma, and the first thing he asked was whether Nathaniel was injured. Vivian was at his bedside when he opened his eyes, and for the first time she saw him look at her differently. No more suspicion, no more hostility, only the respect of one soldier for another. Everything should have been fine. Victor was dead. Marcus had been arrested. Lily was safe. Nathaniel was still with her. But Vivian was not fine. Every night, she lay in Nathaniel's arms on the soft bed in the mansion and wondered. She loved him. She knew that. But did she love him for who he was? Or because he had saved her? Was she with him because she truly wanted to be? Or because she had nowhere else to go? Was she building a new life? Or only running from one cage to another? He was the Mafia. He killed people. She had seen it with her own eyes. Could she live in this world forever? One morning, she sat up in bed and looked at Nathaniel sleeping beside her. His face was peaceful in sleep, the hard edges softened, almost harmless. She touched the scar on his chin, and her heart tightened with pain. "I need time," she said when he woke, gray eyes filling with worry. "Time for what? To know if I love you for who you are, or because you saved me." She drew a deep breath, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I need to know if I am here because I want to be, or because I have no other choice." Nathaniel said nothing for a long moment. She saw the flash of pain in his eyes, the hurt he tried to hide. Then he nodded. "How long do you need?" "I will wait," he said, his voice rough. "As long as it takes." Vivian moved into a new apartment Nathaniel had arranged for her, safer than the old one. A better neighborhood, 24/7 protection. She refused everything, taking only the apartment and a job back at Street Michael's. She needed to live by her own hands. 4 days passed. She worked, came home, slept, woke, repeated. She tried not to think about Nathaniel, but every night she dreamed of his gray eyes. On the 5th day, she came home after a night shift, exhausted and wanting only sleep. She climbed the stairs and reached her apartment door, and stopped. The door was cracked open. She remembered clearly locking it when she left. Survival instinct flared. She should run. She should call the police. She should call Nathaniel. But she did not do any of those things. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Marcus stood in the middle of her living room, his face bruised, one handcuff still dangling from his wrist as if he had torn it free. His eyes were wild, frantic, like a wounded animal made even more dangerous. "You!" he growled, stepping toward her. "You think you can escape me? No one escapes me. No one." Vivian backed up until her spine met the wall. But this time she was not afraid. She was angry. "You ruined my life," Marcus went on, coming closer. "You and that Russian. I will kill you. I will kill you both." He lunged, and Vivian did not run. She stepped aside, exactly the way Nathaniel had taught her. Marcus flew past, crashing into the wall. She turned and drove a kick into his side. He howled, twisting back to punch. She blocked, pain flaring up her arm, but she did not retreat. They fought in the small apartment, furniture toppling, glass shattering with sharp clatter. Marcus was stronger than she was, bigger than she was, but he was crazed and uncontrolled. And she was calm, focused. She remembered every lesson Nathaniel had given her. When Marcus rushed her again, she slipped aside and drove her knee into his stomach. He folded. She snatched up a table lamp and smashed it into his head. He went down. She did not stop. She climbed onto him and punched his face once, twice, 3 times, until he stopped moving. Then she stood, gasping, hands shaking, and called the police. When they arrived, she stood beside Marcus's unconscious body. Her face was bruised, her lips split, but she stood tall. "He escaped from detention," she told the officers, her voice steady. "He broke into my home. I defended myself." They nodded, cuffed Marcus, and hauled him away. This time, he would not escape. Vivian stood alone in the ruined apartment, staring out the window, and she realized something. She did not need to be saved. She had saved herself. She was stronger than she thought, and she wanted Nathaniel. Not because she needed him, not because he could protect her, but because she loved him, because she chose him. She took her phone and made the call. "Vivian?" Nathaniel's voice came through, worried. "I am coming home," she said. "Home to you." The rehabilitation center sat on a hill overlooking the ocean, surrounded by flowers and green trees, more like a resort than a hospital. Vivian passed through the curling iron gate, walked along the stone path to the main building. She found Lily in the back garden, sitting on a wooden bench beneath the shade of an old oak. She almost did not recognize her sister. Lily had changed in only a week. Her eyes were brighter, no longer dulled by drugs. Her cheeks held more color, no longer corpse pale. Her hair had been cut neatly. Her skin was clean. And most of all, she was smiling. A small, fragile smile, but a real one. "Sis?" Lily rose and hugged Vivian. "You came." They sat together on the bench, looking out at the garden in bloom. Vivian told Lily about last night, about Marcus, about the fight in the apartment, about how she had defended herself. Lily listened, eyes wide, then squeezed her sister's hand. "You are amazing," she said, pride in her voice. "You have always been amazing. You just did not know it." Vivian gave a sad smile. "Have you seen my face? It is covered in bruises." "But you won," Lily insisted. "You beat him, alone, without anyone saving you." Silence. Then Lily tilted her head, studying Vivian with a different look now. The look of someone who had been through hell and learned something from it. "Have you talked to Nathaniel?" she asked. Vivian stiffened. "You know about—" "I know," Lily nodded. "They told me. About him. About him paying for me to be here. About him loving you." "Lily, you saved me," Lily said, gentle but steady. "You have always saved me. Since our parents died, you were the only one who protected me. You gave up everything for me." She paused and took a breath. "Now let someone save you." "You do not understand." Vivian shook her head. "I do understand." Lily tightened her grip. "You are afraid to be loved because you are afraid to be hurt. You think you do not deserve it. You think love always comes with pain because Marcus taught you that." She looked straight into Vivian's eyes. "But he is not Marcus. He looks at you like you are his whole world. You deserve to be happy." Vivian's eyes burned. Her sister, the sister she had always believed she needed to protect, was teaching her the most important lesson of her life. She held Lily tight, saying nothing, letting the tears fall. When she left the rehabilitation center, she did not drive back to the new apartment. She drove along the Pacific Coast Highway, the road where everything began. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the ocean, scattering millions of glittering sparks, as if someone had thrown silver dust onto the waves. She drove slowly, looking toward the cliffs along the road, searching for that spot. The place where the black Maybach went over. The place where she had gone after it without thinking. She pulled over, stepped out of the car. The sea wind lifted her hair, carrying salt and freedom. She stood there, looking down at the cliff, remembering that night, the fire, the smoke, the unconscious man, and the split-second decision that had changed her whole life. She drew a deep breath, then let it out. Then she got back in the car and drove on. The Beverly Hills estate came into view as the sun began to set. The iron gate with the double-headed eagle opened as if it had been waiting for her. She drove in, parked at the base of the steps leading to the front door. She stepped out, her legs a little unsteady. She walked to the great door, lifted her hand to knock. The door opened before she could touch it. Nathaniel stood there. He looked like he had not slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, beard unshaved, hair a mess. But his gray eyes looked at her with relief, with joy, with love he was no longer trying to hide. "Vivian," he breathed, as if it were the only word he still knew. She stepped closer, stopping right in front of him, close enough to count his eyelashes. "I do not need you to save me," she said, firm. "I proved that last night. I do not need you to protect me. I can protect myself." Nathaniel swallowed, something like fear flickering in his eyes, fear of what she would say next. "I only need you to love me," she said, her voice softer. "That is all. I can live without you, but I do not want to." Nathaniel closed his eyes, as if trying to hold back what he felt. When he opened them, they were wet. "I have loved you since the moment you threw yourself off that cliff," he said, his voice rough, as if each word had to fight its way through pain to be spoken. "I loved you when you looked at me without fear. I loved you when you told me about your scars. I loved you when you stood in front of Marcus with a gun and chose not to shoot." He lifted his hand and touched her cheek. "I was only afraid you would not choose me. I was afraid you would see that I am a monster and run." "You are a monster," she said, then smiled. "But you are my monster." Then she kissed him. They kissed right there in front of the estate doors, under the burning red sunset. No more hesitation, no more fear, No more questions about the future. Only two people who had found each other in fire and chosen love anyway. From an upstairs window, Irina watched. Tears slid down her wrinkled cheeks, but she was smiling. She pressed a hand to her chest, where her heart beat with happiness, and whispered in Russian, "At last, my son has found his home." 6 months passed like a dream Vivian did not want to wake from. Winter turned into spring. Spring turned into summer, and her world changed completely in a way she never could have imagined. Nathaniel kept his promise. He shifted 70% of the Volkov Syndicate's operations into legitimate business. Real estate with soaring towers in downtown Los Angeles, fully licensed casinos in Las Vegas, a clean shipping company with a massive container fleet. He was still Nathaniel Volkov, still powerful, still wealthy. But slowly, the shadow of the Mafia began to recede. Vivian built a new life of her own as well. The free clinic for the homeless opened 3 months ago, located in downtown Los Angeles, a place where People's Society had forgotten could come for care without paying a cent. The Volkov Foundation funded every expense, but Vivian ran it. She hired doctors, nurses, volunteers. She designed the programs. She stood there every day in her white coat, treating the people no one cared about. Lily graduated from rehab with outstanding results. She enrolled in college, majoring in psychology, saying she wanted to help people like her. She lived in the guest house on the estate, close enough for Vivian to feel at peace, far enough to have her own space. Every Sunday dinner, the whole family sat around the table, Irina cooking borscht and pelmeni, Lily talking about school, Nathaniel listening with a soft smile, Dmitri fully recovered. The loyal guard now had a large scar across his chest to show off, and he showed it to anyone willing to listen. He said it was the finest scar of his life, because it came from protecting his boss. Vivian became the person Dmitri respected most besides Nathaniel, and he often called her doctor in a heavy Russian accent, with a rare warmth. One morning, Vivian stood in front of the bathroom mirror, getting ready for the day. She looked down at her wrists, where the old scars still remained, the cuts Marcus had left behind. She touched them, and for the first time in her life, she did not want to hide them. They were not signs of weakness. They were proof she had survived. She put on a short-sleeved shirt and stepped outside, letting the scars show beneath the sun. But just when everything seemed perfect, darkness came looking for them again. One day before the wedding, Vivian received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of her and Nathaniel walking in the garden, and a handwritten line in Spanish. "Victor will be avenged. The Santos cartel." She handed the note to Nathaniel without a word. He read it, his face tightening, then looked at her. "We postpone the wedding," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Until I handle it." "No." Nathaniel blinked. "Vivian, I have lived in fear long enough," she said, calm but unshakable. 3 years with Marcus, weeks hiding from Victor. I do not want to live that way anymore. We get married as planned. Your safety matters more than any ceremony. And my happiness matters too," she said, placing a hand on his cheek. "I trust you to protect me, but I do not want fear controlling our life." Nathaniel looked at her for a long time, gray eyes searching for certainty in hers. Then he nodded. "All right," he said, "as planned." That night, Vivian heard Nathaniel leave the bed at 2 a.m. She pretended to sleep, listening to his footsteps fade, listening to an engine start. She did not ask where he went. She did not want to know. The next morning, when she woke, Nathaniel was beside her, sleeping deeply, as if he had never left. She received a message from Dmitri. "The threat has been handled. No need to worry." She did not ask for details. Nathaniel did not tell. It was the unspoken agreement between them. That afternoon, the day before the wedding, Nathaniel led her into the rose garden. The sunset stained the sky red, and roses filled the summer air with fragrance. He dropped to one knee. Vivian froze, her heart beating as if it would break. Nathaniel opened a small box in his hand. Inside was not the massive diamond she expected. It was only a simple silver ring, engraved with 2 words, "From ashes." "From ashes?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We are built from ashes," Nathaniel said, gray eyes holding all the love he had. "You from the ashes of a painful past, me from the ashes of my father. We met in fire, and we built this from what was left behind." He smiled. "Ashes cannot be burned again. We have already walked through flame. Nothing can destroy us." Vivian looked at the ring, then at him, the man who had saved her, the man she had saved, the man she loved. She held out her hand. Nathaniel slid the ring onto her ring finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been born to belong there. Vivian looked at him and smiled. "Yes," she said. "Just that." But it was enough. The backyard of the Beverly Hills estate looked like a fairy tale painting under the sunset. Strings of tiny lights wrapped around the rose trellises, shimmering like 1,000 stars fallen to earth. White flowers were arranged everywhere, their sweet fragrance blending with the smell of freshly cut grass and a sea breeze drifting in from far away. A narrow aisle, covered in red carpet, led to an altar decorated simply with flowers and candles. There were no hundreds of guests, no press, no showy spectacle of Los Angeles high society. There was only family. Irina sat in the front row, her hand gripping Lily's, tears already falling before the ceremony even began. The elderly Russian woman wore a navy blue dress her future daughter-in-law had chosen, silver hair pinned up neatly, and on her lips was the happiest smile Lily had ever seen. Lily sat beside her, beautiful in a pastel pink bridesmaid dress. 6 months ago, she had been a walking corpse kneeling on the concrete floor of a warehouse. Now she was a first-year psychology student, with bright eyes and a radiant smile. Dmitri stood beside Nathaniel at the altar, his only best man. The bodyguard wore a black suit, still carrying a gun beneath his vest out of habit he could not break, but his face had softened in a way that felt almost strange. Then the music began, and Vivian appeared. She walked alone down the red carpet aisle. No father to lead her to the altar. She did not need one. She had walked through hell and come back. She could walk into her own happiness by herself. Her wedding dress was simple, an ivory white that shaped her body, not the billowing gown of a princess, but the elegant dress of a woman who knew who she was. Her hair fell naturally, only a small white rose tucked behind her ear, and on her wrists, the old scars were not hidden. Nathaniel stood waiting. The most powerful mafia boss on the West Coast looked like a young man in love for the first time. His eyes lit when he saw her, his lips moving as if he wanted to speak, but could not find the words. When Vivian reached him, he took her hand, and she felt him trembling. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke the traditional words, but Vivian barely heard. She only looked into Nathaniel's eyes. He looked back into hers, and the whole world disappeared. Then it was time for vows. Nathaniel took a deep breath, his hand tightening around hers. "Vivian," he began, his voice rough. "You saved my life on that road. You threw yourself off a cliff for a stranger without thinking. You pulled me out of fire when anyone else would have run." He stopped and swallowed. "Then you saved my soul when you chose to stay. When you saw the monster in me and did not run. When you showed me I could be better." His eyes filled with tears. "I do not deserve you. I know that. But I will spend my whole life trying to deserve your love, to protect you, to love you, until the day I take my last breath." Irina sobbed openly. Lily cried too. Even Dmitri had to turn away to wipe his eyes. Then it was Vivian's turn. She looked at the man in front of her, the man who had changed her life completely, and she smiled. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "I used to believe I did not deserve to be loved. I used to believe I existed only to suffer, to be beaten, to be abandoned. I used to believe that was all I deserved." She drew a deep breath. "You proved me wrong. Not by saving me, but by showing me I could save myself. You taught me to fight. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You loved me when I did not know how to love myself." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I choose you, not because you saved me, but because you showed me I was strong enough to save myself. I choose you, today and every day after, until we become ashes." They exchanged rings. They kissed. And when their lips met under the sunset, Lily and Irina clapped. Dmitri smiled. And for the first time anyone had ever seen, he truly smiled. Irina hugged Lily, tears soaking her face, but her voice overflowed with happiness. "Our family is bigger now," she whispered in Russian. "At last, our family is whole." That night, after the guests were gone, after Irina had gone to bed and Lily had returned to the guest house, Vivian and Nathaniel stood on their bedroom balcony, looking out at the city of Los Angeles glittering below. "I used to think my life was only ashes," Vivian said softly, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. "After the fire that took my parents, after Marcus, after everything, I thought I was only what was left after the flames burned me down." Nathaniel held her tighter. "And now," Vivian smiled, gazing into the distance, where the lights along the Pacific Coast Highway blinked like stars on the ground. The road where they met, The road where she ran off a cliff to save a stranger and found the love of her life. "Now I know," she said. "From ashes, something beautiful can grow." Nathaniel kissed the top of her head, and they stood there in silence, two souls once shattered, finding salvation in each other. Under the lights of Los Angeles, beneath a star-filled sky, their story did not end. It was only beginning with fire on the cliff along the Pacific Coast Highway, and it would continue in light, the light of love, the light of hope, the light of a future they both deserved. The orphaned girl who had been abused found a home, and the cold mafia boss learned how to love. Their story began with fire, and it ended with light. This story brings us many precious lessons in life. First, it is the power of kindness. Vivian did not hesitate to throw herself off a cliff to save a stranger, and that act changed her entire life. Sometimes, a small act can create enormous changes we never expected. Second, the story reminds us that the past does not define the future. No matter how much suffering you have endured, you can still rise and build a new life. Vivian proved that when she stood up after years of abuse and became a strong, independent woman. Third, true love is not control or possession. True love is when someone shows you how strong you are, when they stand beside you and trust that you can make it through hardship on your own. How do you feel about this story? Did it touch your heart? Have you ever faced hardships in life and had to stand back up on your own? Share your feelings in the comments below. We truly want to hear the stories and thoughts from the deepest parts of your hearts. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, tap like, and share this video with your friends and loved ones so they can hear meaningful stories like this too. Every subscription, every like, and every share is a powerful encouragement that helps us keep creating more engaging content every day. We wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peaceful days filled with love. Thank you for staying with us. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.